Good afternoon. I'm going to talk about a subject I am sure you have never heard discussed before. What are you all doing here? What do you mean, what am I doing? You come here to learn Torah? No. Why are you coming to learn Torah? It's a Torah tells it. It's a mitzvah to learn Torah. You don't understand. Why do you think you should do mitzvahs? Why do you think that the Torah is a book of divine origin which obligates you to do mitzvahs? Well, I don't know about you. Let me tell you about myself. I'm an Orthodox Jew. I'm not a Baal Tshuva. I was all my life. I was doing mitzvot. My parents are religious. My grandparents, brothers and sisters. I was always doing mitzvahs without giving it any thought. But I'm no longer a child. Now I'm an adult. So why am I doing it? It's a family tradition. That's all I have to say. The Shulchan Aruch obligates my life from the moment I wake up until the morning I go to sleep. I do all these things my whole life just because it's a family tradition. Just because my father and grandfather, do I do everything that my father told me to do? If I did, I'd be a dentist instead of a scientist. Why in the world should I believe that the Torah is a book of divine origin? What if I've been born in a Christian family? Would I be going to church on Sundays? Would I be going to a Muslim family? Would I be going to the mosque on Friday? What if I were born in Central Africa? Who knows what I would be doing? Are there any rational reasons to believe that the Torah is a book of divine origin? Well, you know, in addition to being an Orthodox Jew, I'm a scientist. Scientists also have their beliefs. They're called theories. Let me tell you how science works. Maybe from that we can get some inkling about why one might want to believe the Torah is a book of divine origin. Now, there's something about science called the scientific method, a complete mythology. According to the scientific method, science work starts with facts. You do experiments and you gain evidence, facts that anybody can repeat. I can do the experiment in Japan, they can do it in the last century, next century. The essence of an experiment is something which anybody can repeat and come up with the same answer. And then after you have a collection of facts, then you try to concoct a theory, some theoretical understanding what might explain these collection of facts. This is completely wrong. That's not the way science works. Science begins with theories, with concepts. In fact, before you have concepts, you can't even understand what the facts are that you're measuring, unless you have some theoretical framework. Science starts with, and the scientists call this, every fact is theory-laden. Every fact that you think it's a fact because you have a theory which explains that this is a fact. So when you have a theory, that's the way science works. Now let me give you some examples to illustrate my point. There's an important theory in modern theoretical physics called the quark. Vital particle called the quark. You may have never heard of the quark, but the quark is one of the fundamental particles of nature. 99.9% of everything you see in this room is quarks. Tables, air, water, the tissues of your body, it's all quarks. Now you probably heard of atoms. At one time they thought the atom was a fundamental particle. In fact, that's what the word means. A means not, like asexual, apolitical, and to means to cut. They thought an atom is a particle which can't be cut, but nowadays you know it's not true. The atom is composed of protons, neutrons, electrons. And these the same protons and neutrons were elementary particles. But now they know it's not true. The protons and neutrons are composed of smaller elementary particles called quarks. 99.9% of everything we know is a quark. What the other 0.1% is, it's the electrons. So this is the basis of modern theoretical physics. It's the theory of quarks. Many Nobel Prizes were awarded for developing quark theory. So you might think this is a fundamental idea, so scientists have studied quarks. They've isolated them, they put them on the table, they measure their charge, they measure their mass, they measure their spin, they've manipulated quarks, they know all about quarks. Well, the truth is no scientist has ever seen a quark. Not with his instruments, not with his, when I say see, I mean with his eyes, I mean with his instruments. There's no experimental direct evidence at all for the existence of quarks. I understand. If there's no evidence, why does, not only is there no evidence, the theory of quarks tells you there never will be evidence. This is called quark confinement. The quarks forever confined inside the protons and the neutrons. You can't get them out. Not only have no scientists ever isolated a quark, no scientists ever will isolate a quark. So why did every scientist believe in quarks? Why were quarks awarded the Nobel Prize? Now here we come to the idea. I have never seen a quark, I, scientist. But if quarks really exist, then there's a prediction. If quarks, according to quark theory, I should find A. And I go to the laboratory, I measure and I find A. According to quark theory, I should find B. I go and I measure and I find B. And C and D and E and F and G, all the predictions of quark theory have been verified experimentally. So it is plausible. Why do you see A, B, C, D, E? Because there really are quarks. It is the most plausible explanation as to why you see all the predictions of quark theory is because quarks really exist, and this is why every scientist believes in quarks. Take another example. The modern theory of cosmology is called the Big Bang theory. And the basis of the Big Bang theory is there was an enormous explosion in the distant past, which can never be reproduced. Nobody was there to see it. Sounds like Matan Torah, an experience, something which happened, and no one was there, and anybody believes it in the Big Bang. Why does everybody believe it? In the Big Bang theory, they can't reproduce it. They weren't there. Why do they believe? Because the Big Bang theory makes predictions. According to the Big Bang theory, there should be Aleph. And we measure and we find Aleph. According to the Big Bang theory, there should be Bet. And we measure and we find Bet. According to the Big Bang theory, there should be Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. The Big Bang theory makes a host of predictions. And we find that every one of these predictions has been confirmed. So the most plausible explanation, why do we see Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey? Because there really was the Big Bang. Really existed. Really occurred. One-time event in the distant past. And that's why this theory was awarded the Nobel Prize, and everyone believes in the Big Bang theory. So now we know how science works. We can apply these ideas to the Torah. The basis of our religion is that there was a one-time event in the distant past, Matan Torah, and Har Sinai. Kodesh Baruch Hu gave the Torah to Bnei Yisrael, an event which left no historical evidence whatsoever, and I must say to admit, I wasn't there. I was busy giving lectures on Torah and science. I couldn't make it. I wasn't at Matan Torah. So why should I believe in Matan Torah? Because like scientists, like the proton, like the quarks, there are predictions in the Torah. The Torah makes statements, and I can check these statements. Now, I'm not discussing statements which are trivial, logical, Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Nevat, Chalav and Vash, and flowing with milk and honey. Norway and New Zealand are also flowing with milk and honey. I want to look at the counterintuitive statements. Statements in the Torah which seem impossible. Let me examine these things and see whether they are correct or not correct. And then I can decide where we stand. So the most dramatic statements in the Torah is the creation narrative in the first chapter of Sefer Bereshit. I can tell just a couple of examples. The very first pasuk is the most exciting pasuk in the whole creation narrative. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Heaven and earth is the Torah expression for the cosmos, the universe, everything. The Torah tells us that the universe began through an act of creation. Presumably creation from nothing. For many years, scientists said it's impossible. You can't make something from nothing. It can't be done. And recently, there has been a reassessment in the area of cosmology. Cosmology is the area of science which deals with the origin of the universe. And the modern theory of cosmology is called the Big Bang theory. And the Big Bang theory is accepted by every cosmologist, taught in every university, was awarded the Nobel Prize, believed by us. Why? And because the Big Bang theory makes predictions. The Big Bang theory, the central theme of the Big Bang theory is that the universe began through an act of creation. The universe began through an act of creation. And today, every scientist speaks of the creation of the universe. And the reason that every scientist speaks of the creation of the universe is today every scientist They take appropriate instrumentation, carry out appropriate measurements, and thereby obtain clear and unequivocal scientific proof that the universe was in fact created. Exactly like the Torah tells us, all the scientists have discovered that the universe was created from nothing, just like the strange prediction. And what do all these scientists mean when they speak of the creation of the universe? What was created to begin the universe? And the scientists have discovered that the universe began with the sudden appearance of an enormous ball of light. The scientists call this the primeval light bulb, as a popular name, the Big Bang, and hence the name of the theory. And what do we read in the Torah? We read in the Torah on the first day of creation, Vayomer Elohim yehi or, vahi or. And God said, let there be light, and there was light on the first day of creation, when there's no sun and no stars and no fluorescent bulbs and no matches and no people and no sources of light anybody ever heard of. And the statement sounds impossible. And now the scientists have discovered, no. For 3,000 years, nobody knew what it meant. No, that's exactly what happened. This prediction of the Torah was exactly what happened. The universe began with the sudden appearance of an enormous ball of light, just like the Torah says. And every single verse in the creation narrative, day 2, the water about the heaven, from day 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, all of these impossible, counterintuitive psukim have now been confirmed. Scientists actually wrote a book about this, sell thousands of copies, that the creation narrative, which the Torah tells us, which seems impossible, exactly that's what happened. What other examples does the Torah tells us about statements which seem crazy, which we can check? In Sefer Devarim, he says, "But Yisrael is am chacham v'navon." We are wise and clever people. The Torah tells us we're not like anybody else. We're smarter than the Frenchmen. We're smarter than the Chinese. That's what the Torah says. Never mind the political correctness of the statement. Let's talk about the factual correctness of it. Are we smarter, more clever than the others? Well, what's a clever person? If you ask a scientist what a clever person is, it's somebody who won the Nobel Prize. Alfred Nobel made a fortune in his life, and he devoted his fortune to establishing 5 prizes called the Nobel Prizes. Physics, chemistry, medicine, and literature and peace. Literature and peace is all politics. Yasser Arafat, Nobel Peace Prize, not discussing that, discussing the prizes in science. It's physics, chemistry, medicine, and later they established a prize in economics. So there are 4 Nobel Prizes. Up to 3 people can share in a Nobel Prize. They've been giving these prizes for more than 100 years. So we have lots of data. There are nearly 800 scientific Nobel Prizes in science have been awarded. What proportion of these 800 prizes was won by Jews? Hold on to your kippot, my friends. 23%! You can argue who is a Jew. 20% glatt kosher Jews have won Nobel Prize. What proportion of the Jews of the population? We're discussing Central Africa and Asia, but where they do research, Europe, North America, the Pacific Rim, we are less than 1% of the population. And we have won 23% of the Nobel Prize. Am, Chacham v'Navon, are wise and clever people. The Wall Street Journal gives out prizes in advanced and breakthroughs in technology. The Wall Street Journal is not known for being pro-Jewish, particularly. And the last time they gave out prizes, they gave out 3 prizes. 2 were won by Israeli firms. 2 out of 3. We let some going in, so it shouldn't look like we're prejudiced against the going. And not just science and technology. Take something far afield. Take music. Who are the great violinists? There's Joshua Heifetz and Nathan Wilstein and Isaac Spern and Philip Zuckerman, and I can't remember all the names of pianists, Daniel Birnbaum and Vala Hormicks and Rubinstein, all of it. 1% of the population. And we excel in every single field that requires intelligence and creativity and spirituality. The Jew stands at the forefront. Who was the iconic figure in science? It's Albert Einstein. In psychology, it's Sigmund Freud. In economics, it's Karl Marx. If you don't like Karl Marx, it's Paul Samuelson and Milton Friedman. The Jew stands at the forefront in every field. Am chacham v'navon. The goyim hate us, and they say we're mass murderers and we're crimes against humanity. We kill Christian children to take their blood to make our matzahs. But the biggest anti-Semite never said that we were stupid. Am chacham v'navon is an accepted fact by everybody, just like the Torah says. What else does the Torah say, counterintuitive, that we can check? We read in Sefer the Void about the history of our country. And it says that we will be driven from a land because of our sins. What happened? Okay, lots of people got driven from their land. But then it says, at the end of time, if we are at the four corners of the world, God will bring us back to our homeland. And my friends, it has happened in our lifetime. An event which there is no parallel in human history, that a people have been dispersed to the four corners of the earth, and after 1,000 years, they've returned to their land. No other example exists. And we have returned to a land and created a thriving Jewish democracy. We have made the desert bloom. We are the startup nation of the world. Our economy is the envy of Europe. We have the strongest army in the Middle East. Every list of the 100 greatest universities in the world contains 3 Israeli universities. There is no other example. The Romans sitting in Rome have a different religion and different language and different culture, and they are not the descendants of the ancient Romans. They happen to be sitting in the same real estate. This is not true for us. We speak the same language, and we have the same religion. We worship the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the same culture, and we are the descendants of the ancient Bnei Israel. This crazy prediction has come true. So it is time to summarize. As a scientist, I passionately believe in quark theory, even though nobody has ever seen a quark, because all the predictions of quark theory have been confirmed. I passionately believe in the Big Bang theory, although nobody was there to observe it, because all the predictions of the Big Bang theory have been confirmed. In the same way, I passionately believe that the Torah is a book of divine origin, even though I was never there and nobody was ever there, because all the predictions that exist are written in our Holy Torah have become confirmed and shown to be true. For the most plausible reason why are they all true? Because the Torah really is a book of divine origin. And therefore, all of you are doing the right things when you come here and learn Torah.
So, we have this opportunity, thank you, Professor, and we have the opportunity to interact with the Professor, and thank you for coming. And the idea is that I mentioned to you many times, that these are questions we'll be getting very often when you get out into the world of, students are, when he came to Magen David, the students flocked him after and didn't let him go for the questions. So we have an opportunity now to interact. If any of you have issues troubling you, help other people, questions of science and Torah, I think we have a time where we can interact and ask some questions. So if anybody wants to ask anything, go ahead.
Ask.
What about the Mabul?
Let me say, first of all, I do not pretend that I can explain everything. I specialize in the first chapter of Sefer Bereshit. I don't really have to answer your questions. To show you I'm a good fellow, I'm going to tell you. I do not hesitate to say I can't explain everything. As a scientist, I'm not finished. Wait. As a scientist, I can't explain everything either. If I could explain everything in science, I'd be out of a job. Scientists, workers that can't explain everything. I've written 140 scientific articles. I write about what I can explain. Anything I can't explain, I don't write about it. You see, all scientists do this. So the Mabul, I'm not ashamed to say I have no complete explanation. But scientists have discovered something very, very interesting. They discovered that an enormous, first of all, when the Torah says about the world, it doesn't mean China, Japan, and Australia. It means the Jewish world. Jewish world is the Mediterranean, North Africa, Asia Minor. That's the world in the Torah. The Torah is not a history book. It's about the Jewish people. And they discovered that there was an enormous flood in the Middle East. And not millions of years ago, not hundreds of thousands of years ago, or tens of thousands. A few thousand years ago, there was an enormous flood in the Middle East. And this flood left a puddle. And this puddle is the Black Sea. The Black Sea is the remnant of this enormous flood in the Middle East. Now, I want to emphasize the features of this flood which do not correspond to what it says in Sefer Noah. I'm not saying it corresponds, it's not, but let nobody tell you there was never a flood in the Middle East. It's a babamais. It's a story. It's a mythology. Since 1980s, scientists have discovered there was an enormous flood in the Middle East. But I can't explain everything. I'm not ashamed to say I can't explain everything. Yes?
So, what would be your approach towards miracles in the Torah? Would you try to explain those scientifically as well?
Miracles. Miracles tell you it didn't happen according to the laws of nature. That's what a miracle means. The Rambam says if you don't believe in miracles, you're an apikoros. We believe that God intervenes in the activities of man.
So science definitely can't explain everything.
No, you understand. Science does not. Miracles are not against science. Science says something different. Science says that under normal circumstances, that the laws of nature are operative. And the universe proceeds according to the laws of nature under normal circumstances. Whether there are miracles or not is not against the laws of science. This is not normal circumstances. Science doesn't deal with God. Science says when God isn't functioning against the laws of nature, then science proceeds according to the laws, the world proceeds according to the laws of nature. But if there's the intervention of God, it's not against science.
What if there is a scientific explanation, or I don't know, let's say the makat dam and some algae colored, who knows what?
Do you have to explain the
explain the natural. The Torah says it wasn't natural. If I could explain it naturally, it would be against the Torah. The Torah says that God intervened. Moshe hit the waters of the Nile. And God intervened against the laws of nature to turn the water into blood. That's what the Torah tells us. But let's take another miracle, so to speak. Kriyat Yam Suf. You ever read what the Torah says about Kriyat Yam Suf?
Strong wind.
Oh! The Torah bothers to tell you how it happened. There was a strong wind blowing all night. And therefore, if I take this, nothing against them, if I take this cup of water, if I stir it strong enough, it'll be dry in the middle of a cup. A centrifuge works this way. The Torah bothers telling you that Kriyat Yam Suf was not against the laws of nature. A hurricane, a tsunami, the water goes back, water goes forth. So what's the miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf? The miracle is the timing. Just when Bnei Yisrael got there, the wind occurred and blew away the water and made the dry land, made the land dry. Then when Bnei Yisrael passed and the Egyptians came, the hurricane stopped and the water came back and drowned all the Egyptians. The miracle of Kriyat Yam Suf is the timing, not the actual physical event. But the Esther Makot, the actual physical event, at least some of them, is against the laws of nature. Yes?
The professor's argument was one that answers the truth of the Torah Shebachar. Do you have any...
I didn't prove, no, you're wrong. I didn't prove anything. You make a mistake. I have not proved anything. A plausibility argument does not prove it. A plausibility argument is it is reasonable and plausible to accept it. That's what I want to get. There is no proof for HaKadosh Baruch Hu or Torah Shemayim, but it's not irrational, it's plausible. Okay.
So are there any plausibility arguments for Torah Shabbat Peh?
What do you mean by plausibility arguments? We don't believe Torah Shabbat Peh is min HaShemayim. Torah Shabbat Peh, the Tanoim and the Amoraim, they wrote what they understand stood from the Torah. What am I supposed to explain? The Torah Gemara says explicitly that there was no Ruach HaKodesh in Sanhedrin, Yud Aleph, I think, Mishametu,
I think he's talking about the Halakha and Moshe Sinai laws of Torah Shabbat.
Sinai, so if HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, what is there to explain?
What does it say in the Chumash that
It doesn't say in the Chumash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe,
No, it
it's
doesn't
in
say
the
that
Chumash in the Chumash.
No, it doesn't say that he gave him the halachot that the
It says he
Chazal said
gave
that he
him.
gave him.
I said, he gave him the Torah from the Flash. I said that he brought, Moshe went up 40 days and he got, that's what it says. It doesn't say that. Here it is, it says that. That's Halacha Moshe Sinai, and then the Amorim and Tom, they didn't understand everything. Beis Hillel says this, and Beis Shammai says this, and that says nothing to explain. Yes,
You said before that.
could you speak in a louder, please?
Yes, you said before that the Big Bang works perfectly according to the Torah. The or, that was, let's say, the Big Bang. That worked. But if that's the case, then according to the Torah, the day one was really billions of years.
You're asking
correct?
about the time scale. Actually, day one is 3 minutes, but never mind that. You're asking about the time scale. You're
Yeah.
asking, what do you say, Sheshet to make B'riah and the billion-year-old universe according to the scientists? This question was addressed by the Rambam. You ever read Rambam? Mor Nevuchim Chelik Bet Perak Kafeh. He has a whole chapter addressing this question about what happens when the science and Torah don't agree. Okay? And he gives his example is the creation of the universe. And the Rambam says the following. I'll tell you what the whole Rambam says. He says, I believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, but not because it says so in the Torah. So why do I believe? Oh, why isn't that enough? So let me give you another example. The Torah is forever telling you HaKadosh Baruch Hu walks and talks and speaks and changes his mind and this. It treats HaKadosh Baruch Hu in what's called anthropomorphic terms, as a human being. And if you take these Pesukim literally, you are an Apokos. It is because it is a fundamental belief of ours that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no human form, ain't no goof, ain't no he doesn't get angry, he doesn't change his mind. The Torah speaks in these terms, in allegorical terms. In the same way that the Greeks believed that the universe was eternal. If the Greeks had straw, and there was no B'riah Tolam at all, not one word, the whole first parak never happened. That's what the Greeks believed, but their arguments are weak. So why should I go away from the pshat, the literal meaning of the Torah, for weak arguments? But if their arguments were strong, I would say that. Just the way I say HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't change his mind and walk and talk, I would say that there was no creation, and I would take the whole thing as an allegory, if the arguments were weak. So he summarizes. The first thing you should do to a prophet is try to understand the Kepshuto. If that works, we're finished. If it doesn't work, if there are solid arguments that it doesn't work, take the verse Lo Kepshuto. Now we have solid arguments that it wasn't 6 days, it was a multi-billion-year universe. And therefore he says, take it Lo Kepshuto. But there's more to say. If you take Kepshuto, you have all sorts of questions. It doesn't only say Yom Rishon, Sheni, Shlishi. It says Vahi Erev, Vahi Voker. So Yom, you can say, is 24 hours on my clock. But morning and evening are astronomical events associated with the sun. If there's no sun in the sky, there is no Erev and there's no Voker. So what does the Torah mean? But if we say it means an era, we speak about the sun, the dawn of a new era, the sunset of an era, it fits. But so you can ask if it means era, why does it say day? Let's say era. Portion. And the answer can be because what comes after the Sheshet Shemini, the 6 days of creation? What's after it?
Shabbat.
Shabbat. And one of the purposes of Shabbat that we learn in Aseret HaDibot is Zecha the Maaseh Bereshit. We're supposed to one day a week stop and think that God created the world. And since Shabbat really is a day of 24 hours, to make more clear, to strengthen the connection between the creation and the Shabbat. First of all, there are 6 phases of creation. 6 eras, you can make it 7, 10, 6, and they're called days to strengthen the connection between B'riat Olam and the Shabbat. And it's not only it's only the Rambam. Rashi, just a second, we'll come to you. Rashi in Sefer Hosea, Perek 6, Pasuk Bet. The words of Hosea say Yomayim and then Yom HaShlishi. And Rashi, not an Apokos especially, says Yomayim is 2 days. And Yom HaShlishi, Et Rishon Ayin Tet. Et Sheni, Yom Shlishi is the Et Shlishi, the first Adar the first base to Mikdash, second base, and Rashi says it says day, and it means period. So it's not any unusual to say, to have the word day meaning period.
So, when we're talking more broadly about the Torah and science, what about how far should we go to re-examine or re-explain Chazal's interpretation of some of the science
To
they knew?
understand, Chazal is not telling you what happened. The Midrashei Chazal are not a continuation of Pshat. They're not a replacement of Pshat. The Rambam writes about this in the Parish HaMishnayot. If you understand the Chazal literally, he says, you're a fool. He uses stronger language, but we'll only say you're a fool. He says worse than that. Not only are you a fool, you make Chazal look like fools. And they're allegories, they're messages wrapped up in this certain way of speaking. In my favorite example, ever heard of Aesop's fables? The fox and the grapes? Have you heard of that? It's famous. Anybody who thinks this story is speaking about foxes and grapes doesn't know what's flying. The story is describing human behavior. Important aspect of human behavior, and it encloses it. In the example of as if foxes and grapes and talking, it's the way it's an allegory, it's a metaphor. And Chazal, every Chazal is important, and none of them are to be taken literally. The important Torah messages that Chazal give us, and they close them as an allegory. It's not the Bishop.
And I think you might be speaking also about halachic aspects of Chazal.
Not discussing halacha.
I.e. lice and their scientific error. Is that more?
It's related, yeah.
And everything I've been saying has nothing to do with halacha. Oh, I should have said that.
No, but I mean, I think he means, let's say, when Chazal makes statements that they clearly meant to be taken literally, i.e. that lice don't reproduce spontaneous generation.
Halacha, you mean what the scientists say about halacha? That's scientific, that's Chazal's understanding.
Right.
How far should we go to be Mahamid Chazal's words?
What do you mean Chazal's word? When Chazal makes a statement about science, it's the knowledge of science. There was known at the time of
Alright, so
Chazal.
this is sort of what brings me to another question. This is sort of coming from the reverse side. The people who say, since science is always changing, there's really no
Science
good
is
reason.
not always changing.
It's
That is
clearly
a
changing. The
mythology.
understanding of
That
science.
is a mythology. I quote in my book, which I don't have here, that Steven Weinberg, a Nobel Prize winner, wrote a book, and he mentions this subject. And he says, if you look at the last, in physics, he's a physicist, in the last 100 years, how many theories of physics that had achieved consensus among scientists, how many were later proven to be wrong? And the answer is 0.
What about 500 years?
We're discussing the last 100 years.
I want to discuss 500.
Science did not, right, 500 years ago, there wasn't any science 500 years. Nowadays, science has developed, and scientists know what's right and what's wrong. They can perform measurements that couldn't possibly perform before.
And we're going to perform even
science
greater measurements.
receives consensus. Not some theory which one guy says and it comes and goes, which has achieved consensus in the scientific community, that it is supported by a vast array of scientific, that's how you get consensus. And so later it's proved to be all wrong. In the last 100 years this hasn't happened. That's a good record. So the next 100 years you come back to me and show me an example. Yes?
What would happen if the ratio of
I can't hear you.
What would happen if the ratio of Nobel Prize winners changed from
23% to 1%.
What if it changed
That
to 1%?
requires 23 centuries without a single Jew winning the Nobel Prize. You
Let's
come
say-
back to me in 23 centuries and tell me
Let's
what
say
this
that
happened.
happened.
Let's say that happened.
Yeah, let's
Then
say
I
that
would
happened.
say that this is not an example of Am Chacham Benavot. What else should I say?
Which calls into
But
question-
actually, the chances of this happening, 2 years ago I had the data for 2 years, there were 8 Nobel Prize given in sciences. You know how many were Jews? 7! We let one guy in, so it shouldn't look like we're discriminating.
You know, to
Why
me,
should you think
to-
this?
to
Why
me
should you
that-
think this should happen?
To me, that's not a good argument to give to a 21-year-old.
I'm not discussing giving arguments to a 21. How old are you? I'm discussing talking to you. If you don't think that the
Even to
Jews
me,
have some special
to me-
talent in
to
science,
me-
I don't know what to tell you.
To me, that doesn't work as a prediction, because
It's not a prediction. I'm discussing the past.
Oh, so well, before you said that what was written in the Torah, the way we verify it
Yes.
as a prediction.
As
we look-
now,
we look at-
what do we measure
we
now?
But if you looked at it 100 years ago, you wouldn't have had that
Because
prediction.
there was no Nobel Prize for that 100 years ago.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm calling into question your criteria.
I don't follow what you're saying. The Torah
I'm
the
gonna tell
Torah
you-
makes a prediction.
I'm going to tell you that it's not a good way to approach this, to prove the truth of the Torah.
I'm not
Through
proving
this-
it.
Or not proving the plausibility, whatever you want to call it.
Plausibility, that's what I want to call it.
To me, that doesn't work. Your first argument, your first analysis
Yeah.
worked better for me.
Okay.
But the second one doesn't work, and I don't feel it works for those who are inquiring minds. Another detail,
Can you elaborate why you think it doesn't work?
because I think it falls apart. Number one, you're using the
Not
Nobel
it falls
Prize.
apart, he thinks it will fall apart in the future.
No, even now it can fall apart.
How?
Or before it falls apart. There are several things that can weaken that argument. Number one is you're using the Nobel Prize as the measure of Hacham benevolent.
I think so.
Okay, there are other measurements of Hacham benevolent. Number two, those you said they're Jewish. How many will be Jewish, or how many were Jewish in the past, even if they may be biologically somewhat
I'm
Jewish?
discussing, I'm discussing halachically Jewish, not from.
Right.
They don't
No,
put
I
it
know.
into
And that,
halachically
the
Jewish.
the halachic Jewishness going forward with enormous rates of assimilation is being called into question. And even these scientists,
I think what he's saying is that this argument, as opposed to, let's say, some of the scientific arguments which are happened and are concluded and finished, this argument is basing on an evolving evidence. The evidence is consistently changing, and therefore it's vulnerable to be disputed. Whereas the Big Bang is no longer vulnerable to disputation.
It was twice
that
as
what-
much.
is that
If
some
I
of the-
said we have twice as many Jews, yes, twice as much can go down to 1.5 and 1.3. But when we're 23 times the population, it isn't very valuable. If it doesn't speak to you, it doesn't speak to you.
I'd like to ask a question. We spoke about the eras in the Torah, right?
Yes.
Different eras in the days. What about the fact that scientifically the order of those eras don't fit?
They do fit.
I mean, the vegetation and
They do
cosmology.
fit. They do fit. There are two cycles. I write about this in my book. There are two cycles of creation. First is the intrastructure of the universe. The first 4 days of creation discuss the development in the correct order of the infrastructure of the universe. And then the last 2 days, 5 and 6 days, discuss the inhabitants of the universe. The animals are inhabitants together with human beings. We are the inhabitants of the, first you make the building, then you invite the inhabitants. And it's interesting that in the Torah point of view, plants and animals are totally different. From a biological point of view, plants and animals are closely related. The Torah is not a biology book. It views plants as instruments which serve man. We get food, and we get clothing, and we get rope, and we get medicine, and so on. Plants are described in the part which discusses the infrastructure of the universe. So 4 days are fit, and then the 5th and 6th day goes back and discusses the inhabitants. And the events of the 5th day are before the 4th day. It's like if I was writing a history book of world history, I might take the 6-chapter book. The first 4 chapters are European history, starting with the Romans and the Greeks, and chapter 4 is the 20th century European history. Then I go back to American history and start with Columbus, and the 5th day and 6th day. So the 5th day, Columbus, of the 1400s, is previous to the 4th day European history in the 20th century, because I'm discussing a new topic on American history.
How does that work with the 6 days?
That works, right? The 5th and 6th day, the 6th day comes after the 5th day. And the 4th is after the 3rd, the 3rd is after the 2nd, and the 2nd is after the 1st.
But the 3rd day
Yes,
is before the 4th day.
correct.
Right, so we're dealing with, the 4th day is more cosmological, sun,
Cosmological.
The sun, is it?
Okay, sure.
I'm saying-
It's a solar system.
Solar system, right, it's not the beginning, that's
Right.
true. Right, but let's say astronomical, let's say. Would
You
that be-
think the fourth day discusses the formation of the sun and the moon,
Right,
right?
That's right.
That's not what it discusses.
okay, good, that's right.
Okay. The obvious question is, how can you have a sun, plants,
Exactly, that's really what I
before the
was.
sun, plants use chlorophyll, as with the sunlight, without sunlight there can be no green plants. And the truth is that the second day discusses the formation of the solar system. My Malaki is also that the fourth day discusses something totally different. It discusses the sun and moon the way we observe it today. When the solar system was first formed, the sun and the moon were totally different from what we observe today. The sun was very, very dim. A day wasn't 24 hours, a year wasn't 365 days. Seasons were totally different from, it took a long time for the solar system to reach its equilibrium that we observe today. And it says that the seasons, Yomim what's the word? It's here, it's not. I have it right here. Moedim, the seasons. The seasons were totally different. The seasons we have today came much later after. So first came the sun. It was very dim, but you could form plant and primitive animal life. And then the sun became brighter and brighter and brighter. You could make modern animals. And the way we get energy from our body, the ATP, is totally different from the way it started at the beginning, because we based it on the bright sun in the beginning. There wasn't a bright sun. Animals worked differently, and now then the solar system settled into its present configuration, and we have the pleasant seasons, and we have something which makes civilization work. That happened later. That's the first. Yes.
I have a question on methodology.
Methodology.
The professor is speaking to a group of rabbinical students, so I guess the aim is that we should become kind of more prepared dealing with the public on this.
No, I'm discussing here because I was asked to discuss it.
Well,
I don't know what methodology works for you is.
So this is what I wanted to ask you some advice on the subject, because I've observed different rabbis that give lectures on the topic of science, and they happen to be relatively knowledgeable on the topic of science, but I've noticed one problem. Maybe you can give me some solution to this problem, that they're sitting in a room with college students, very educated people, and their facts may be correct, or
or may not be correct.
Or may not be correct, but I'm talking about the lecturers, the rabbis. Their lecture may be very sound, but when they're addressing a population of students who are coming from an academic background, they'll kind of offhand dismiss some of the conclusions they're making just because they're rabbi. Let me explain.
Dismiss conclusions.
Yeah, they'll dismiss the conclusions of the lecturer or the rabbi just because he's a rabbi. So, as an example, the rabbi will come and say many different things based on research and facts from scientists that he's seen. And the students there won't accept what he'll say because they'll say, you're not a scientist, you're a rabbi. You're quoting scientific information, but what do you really know? I am a scientist, and those are scientists, and these are what scientists who are studying science are saying. So it's like a rabbi going and opening up a sefer, and he coming to a conclusion, or a regular guy coming to a conclusion from a sefer. So, yes.
I'm not a rabbi, I'm a scientist.
Right, but we're not scientists.
You want to know what should the rabbi say about Torah and science?
How do we
shouldn't talk about it. I don't give you piskei halacha in Yeridea and Choshen Mishpat because I'm not a rabbi.
So that's your answer.
The unfortunate thing is that many rabbis think they know about science. They make statements which are completely wrong. They pick up a word or two and they seem to put it together. I've heard such nonsense from rabbis about Torah and science. And it's useful for a person not to speak about something that he
So on this question of methodology, you suggest do not approach the subject.
I suggest that they should say that this is not my field. And there are people it is their field. And they can mention Professor Aviezer has written books about it. And therefore there are answers to these questions, and I'm not qualified to tell you, but there are answers to these questions. Look at his book, send him an email, and you'll get answers to your questions. But the worst thing to do is for the rabbi, unqualified in science, is to make scientific statements that leads to this.
But how do you explain what you and I are doing, based on your answer that you just gave? You and I have prepared a curriculum
Yes.
for rabbis
Right.
to teach.
The curriculum is about science, and the rabbis didn't make the curriculum. The rabbis will use the information that we present to teach the students. And there should be science teachers in the schools too who will realize, yes, this is standard science.
But here he is, he's going to take a position one day, God willing. He's going to be mechanech. And these questions are going to come up.
And you can tell him, Professor Aviezer has a teaching unit which explains these things.
And you just say that, or you explain what you said?
You can explain, well, as far as I can explain.
So now on the topic of, I'm sorry I'm thinking so much, but on the topic of methodology, you're saying something a little bit different. You're saying that instead of saying in your own name, this is the science, you're saying, do not say anything on your own, quote a scientific article, quote this professor, quote that professor.
Say first, I think this is what I understand. I am not a scientist. I am not qualified to give an authoritative answer, but I think I read this and this about this. But you should say it in a way that the student will understand. If you're wrong, it's not the Torah that's wrong. It's because you didn't understand this part of science because you're not a scientist. You don't. People ask me, what about Malchut Beit David? It doesn't fit the archaeology. What do you have to say about that? And my answer is, I'm not an archaeologist. And I don't speak about archaeology that I don't understand. And I say that, but I've learned in science, what many people thought in science, they had it wrong. And the real science fits. So maybe the real archaeology will fit. I don't know, but I'm not a historian, I'm not an archaeologist, and I tell you, I have the seichel to say, I am not qualified to answer your question. Doesn't mean your question is right. Doesn't mean it has no answer, but I'm not the address.
Very often when people try to prove that the Psukim in the Torah, which is one you left out, and I'm curious if you have done on purpose, because I don't know that it stands up. They bring the list of kosher animals.
Yes.
And they take the four.
They take 4 examples and say, these 4 animals
are the only one.
Because they have only one siman.
So, could you comment on that? Is that what your thoughts are on that?
Anyone who says, this proves that Torah is ben Hashemayim because you will not find another animal which has that statement is totally wrong. Look at camel. Well, there's llamas in South America. Well, there are kinds of camels. Whenever you find an animal which doesn't fit this, well, it's a kind of this. And the hair chooses cut. It doesn't mean a hair. It means something. You don't prove anything.
Yeah, but there, the Torah seems to be wrong.
Not why is it? How do we know what an never is? Okay? We don't know what an you're right, it looks, the standard translation is wrong. Standard translation gives a result which seems to be wrong. This is, I don't know why the Torah had it. It says you need 2 examples. Why do we have to give examples which have only one? I don't know. But it's not a question of Amunah. I don't know why the Torah had to add this information. It says 2, you don't have 2, okay, 1 isn't good enough. You need 2 to be kosher. 2 siman.
I'm only quoting it because people use that.
I know, and it's terrible. Never use that to prove. Never use that. I don't understand. Why do you have to, why it enters their mind this is going to prove something? I don't know why the Torah gives these 4 examples. I don't know. So I don't know this. It's the only thing that I don't know what the Torah said. The Torah tells us who is Yishmael's children. Why do I have to know who Yishmael's children? I don't know why it says who Yishmael's children were. Nobody says I'm not going to keep kosher because it says Yishmael's children. But nobody tries to prove Torah's ben Hashemayim for Yishmael's children. I don't know. The Torah gives information. I have no idea why it says. No, I don't think it's. But to use that to prove. Yes.
What do you do about evolution?
Evolution. I have a principle. Good questions do not have short answers. I would not be respectful for the question or the questioner to give an answer chaplap. I have a lecture of 45 minutes to answer your question. It is the longest chapter in my book. And if you know what the scientists have discovered about evolution in recent times, revolution has become good for the Jews. Exactly fits to what the Torah said, what they discovered, and what they thought the Torah said, the whole Torah Shlema about evolution, which I wouldn't even think of trying to answer al regel echad. It's an excellent question, and everybody who gets into the world has to know how to deal with this question. That's why I write books.
Do you have that on a YouTube video?
I don't have. I don't make it to some people lecture certain of my, I have no idea if this is not one of my standard lectures. I don't know if people, I'm not aware that it's been on YouTube. But there's no problem with evolution. But it's not 2 sentences to explain.
Which book is it?
That's book In the Beginning.
If anyone wants, we can.
Yes, $20 and it's yours. I would have
In the beginning and
and then the other one is Modern Science and Ancient Faith. But evolution isn't evolution is answered in the first book. In the beginning. Darwin's book is the most widely quoted book that nobody has read. That's gone.
Sometimes, I think it's coming off of Mickey's question, sometimes when people try to explain, let's say scientific, like middle Talmud science or medicine as compared to what we have today, they use the answer of nishtanu hatva'im, that the nature we have today is different than it once was.
Yes.
How valid is that type of a statement?
Zero. If you conduct your physical health according to what the Rambam says, you won't live out the year. But Chazal spoke about science was what they understood in their time.
So it's not that it changed.
Nothing
It's just
changed.
that they didn't have lack of information.
Nothing changed. They said that an 8 months baby is like as dead as a stone. You think an 8 months baby. And 7 months baby, he's fine. Everyone knows the longer the baby stays in the mother's uterus, the greater the chances of survival.
So
In practice, everybody treats 8 month baby. No one says I can't deal with it on Shabbat because no one says this. Maybe he was not 8 months and this and that. Even if you know the husband was home for 2 days when he got her pregnant and it's in the 8th month, they will be Mechalel Shabbat for his baby. And they should be.
Yeah, but that's because today we have the technology to save the baby, neonatal units and all that stuff.
That's not what it says. It says dead as a stone.
They didn't have the technology to save the baby. Maybe back
But they
then.
had technology to save 7 of them.
No, they didn't need technology. Maybe, you know,
But the 7th one,
we
you
don't
know.
know.
The 8th one, we do know. The 8th one is more likely to survive.
But today we have studies. We let 7-month and 8-month babies live without doing anything to them, and we saw we don't have studies like that. We don't let that happen.
Yaakov, listen. 7th month, he's telling you, is less survivable than an 8th month.
I know, but how is he telling me that?
Every obstetrician will tell you that.
But not based on any facts that they saw.
They've been doing obstetrics for decades.
Right, but
They know.
they put the
Trust
baby right
me,
away into
you don't have to
care.
do it
They
in
don't-
this way. They have trust me, they know what to say.
If they were able to save 7th month in Hazal's time,
Right,
but not 8th month,
right.
he's saying that doesn't make scientific sense, because if you could save a 7th month, you for sure can save an 8th month. If you can't save an 8th month, then you can't save a 7th month. So there's nothing different. It's not you need neonatal for 8 months, but you don't need neonatal for 8 months.
Human physiology has radically changed in the last 1,000 years. That one.
So then how did they, so taking all technological advances aside, why would they come up with such a theory?
I have no idea. It was probably one of the common theories of their era.
And they just
Why does
accepted
the
it as
Rambam
fact.
say, not in Moreh Nevuchim, in Mishnah Torah, he says that the planets go around the earth. It's like a Ptolemaic theory, okay?
David, I think, can I?
Yes, yes.
I think there is a reason why they have it, and with respect to, I think it's simple. What they usually normally saw was 7 and 9 months. Hakamim has a theory that a 7th month child was a full gestation period, that there were 2 gestation periods, a 7th month and a 9 month.
2 modes.
2 modes. That's what they thought. It's not that it's 7th month is a short 9th month. It's a fully developed 7th month. That was their theory based on the prevalence. 8th month was not a prevalence, so they felt the 8th month is either, it's a safek, yeah, 8th month is either, it's a safek, it's either a long 7th month gestation period or a shorter 9th month gestation period. That's what Hazal say. That's explicitly what Hazal says. I don't know anything about science, but I read what Hazal say. That is what they said. So therefore, that's how they looked at it. Today we know that there is no 2 gestation periods. There's 1 gestation period. And the longer it goes, the closer it is to finishing. The less it goes, the shorter it is.
Exactly.
That's the simple, I think,
Exactly.
with your permission, that's...
Couldn't agree more.
See, and I'm a rabbi.
Nobody's perfect. You have to understand that Chazal's statement about science and nature as what was understood in their day. The Rambam says this. Chazal say in Psachim and Sadi Dalad, there's a machlokas between the Goy, the Greek astronomers, and Chazal, what happens to the sun at nighttime. The sun go over the earth or beneath the earth. And it says, well, Divreihem, I forget, are more logical. That's their job, they're astronomers, we should accept what they say instead of what I say. Chazal says it. And everybody else says it.
Any last questions?
I mean, it's not plausible at all to think that human physiology changed based on environment or...
Such radical changes in a few hundred years? No, it is not reasonable to think that radical changes in human physiology occurred in the last few hundred years.
What about the discrepancy between the lifespans of the human beings in the beginning of creation?
I have a whole chapter. A
A
whole chapter on that in my book, Fossils and Faith. It's chapter 11, that the recent discoveries in the science of aging have shown that there is no reason why human beings cannot live 1,000 years. So why don't they? We have that whole chapter saying there's nothing implausible about that. Science of aging is nice.
What about seemingly
I can't hear you.
imperfections in creation?
I
Like,
understand what you're saying.
they point to
Could
the
you
eye.
speak a little louder,
Yes.
please?
What about seemingly imperfections in creation? Like the scientists point to the eye, and they say like certain connections are,
The optic nerve is in the wrong spot.
yeah, are backwards.
What's the question?
So they prove from that must mean there is not a creator, because how could you
You
create
have to
something?
read my chapter. What does it mean that God created man? If you knew what it means that God created man, you would understand that that's not a question. The second, there's another creation story in the second chapter. In the second chapter of creation, we speak about that in the conference in Miami. After the first creation story, everything is totally affair. Guess what? There's another creation story. And it says, Elo Tov Shemaim, where he baram b'yom hasotus. And it talks about man. It says, Vayitzer, not Vayivra. Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et Adam afar min ha'adamah. We are made as a physical creature. We call it evolution. And then it adds, Vayipach be'apav nishmat chayim. And after we have a physical creature, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us a neshama. That's what makes us unique. We are physical creatures just like the chimpanzees and the crocodiles and the snakes. He made us, not created us. But then he took the physical creature and gave us a neshama. And our uniqueness is not the physical part of Afami Adama. Our uniqueness is the neshama. And how the eye works and the optic works, it doesn't matter. That's the physical. Man is the shiluv, the combination of the physical and the spiritual. Our physical entities are just like any other physical creature in this world. We can't swim like the beaver or like the dolphin. We can't run like the deer. We can't fly like the birds. But nothing special about us physically. But what's special about us is we have a neshama. And that's what B'riat Adam in the first chapter means. What's created in us is the neshama. That's the unique feature. So you can't look at man's physical features and imperfections and say, there was no creation. That's not what creation is talking about. It's talking about every single Rishon says, what means man? His reason, his seichel and higayon and spirit, the spirituality, that's what makes us unique creatures. That's B'riat Adam. Physically, we're nothing special. Whether the eye is this way or that way, it doesn't interest the Torah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.